Any moment now. My name is John Coonrod. I'm Executive Vice President of the Hunger Project. Thank you. And I deeply appreciate you all being here today. The purpose of today is really for all of us to bring ourselves as powerfully as we can into the heart of the Hunger Project, and particularly the heart of the Hunger Project today. And that was something, some of us have been in the Hunger Project for a long time, some of us are brand new to the Hunger Project, but for an old-time person, what did it say about our relationship with the Hunger Project on the original enrollment card? Who knows?
The Hunger Project is
It's
willing to be thankful to the end of starvation and idea that the time has come.
The Hunger Project is mine completely, and Dwight remembers every word of it.
Wow.
So, in order for it to be yours completely, we all need to know what's going on and what we're doing and why we're doing it and how we're doing it and the impact that it's having. So that's what today's session is about. Tonight we'll have a wonderful dinner together. We'll have a tremendous inspiration. But for those of us who like the wonky details, this is our event today. So I'm going to give some introductory remarks to create a fairly detailed frame of reference, and then we're going to have a wonderful panel and interactions with some of our leaders from around the world. So take out your phone. Take out your smartphone, go to your browser, and go to this page, pollev.com/THPglobal977. So this is, when did you first participate with the Hunger Project? In our first decade, second, third, fourth, or fifth decade? Everyone could please indicate that. Okay, we're going to stop doing this one and we're going to do the next one. What one word expresses your understanding of the Hunger Project?
Wow.
One word?
You can enter more than one word. Okay, next. What would you like from today? Give a thought, put in a few words of what you would like out of as a result of today. Partnership, great. Inspiration, good. I know for a fact we have some inspiring people who are going to be up here shortly. Excellent. Yay, new investors.
Do we have a password?
Thank you for that. This past week, October 2nd, was the 150th birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi. And this was his writing desk, where all of those newspapers and books and everything he wrote, this is where he wrote them. And on the day he was assassinated, he left behind a note. And it said, when things just seemed to be too much, and at that point in India's history, things really seemed like too much, think of the face. He said, I will give you a talisman. Here's your talisman. Think of the face of the poorest person you've ever seen and ask yourself whether the action you contemplate will restore that person to control over their own life and destiny. Now that is something I live by. It's something that has always inspired the Hunger Project. And I always think of this woman. I think, Charlie, your brother took this picture, even though Warner Crouton took credit for it. She has a baby on her back. She's 15 years old. She's pregnant with her second. She's scratching out a living for her family on marginal land with tools that haven't been improved in 1,000 years. No access to health care, no access to education, And probably most importantly, she lives in a society that doesn't permit her any voice in the decisions that affect her life. She doesn't get to decide who or when she's going to marry, how many children she may have, and there's no meaningful government within walking distance. So her fundamental human right to have a voice in the decisions that affect her life is systematically prohibited. That's what the Hunger Project addresses. Those root causes, those systemic causes that deny her the fundamental opportunities she and other people in her community would need to have a life of self-reliance and dignity. So that is where the Hunger Project begins. Our vision in the Hunger Project is a world where every woman, man, and child leads a healthy, fulfilling life of self-reliance and dignity. That is the vision that sustains this organization day after day, year after year. Now, that systemic change requires a profound change in human history. What makes human history? Anybody know what makes human history? Or even have an opinion about what makes human history?
Patriarchy.
Today, yes, patriarchy is making human history, but Tolstoy said that it's not made by the Napoleons or the great, quote, men of history. History is made by the daily decisions of every single person in the world. My wife and I were recently at an event. It was set in the year 2069 on Mahatma Gandhi's 200th birth anniversary. And it was a performance by these children. And they started by announcing the Nobel Peace Prize for 2069 as going to every single person on Earth, because in 2069 there had been no acts of violence. Oh. And then the rest of the play was, grandmother, you lived back in those horrible days of 2019. How did we come upon this harmonious, verdant world that we have today? Well, part of it is we need to really understand these great currents of history, and then we need to get out in front of it and play a catalytic role. Martin Luther King used to always quote, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. And it's our job to see how much we can bend it towards justice. And that's what we do in the Hunger Project. We are guided by a question, what's missing? What's missing, which if provided would catalyze humanity to take a quantum leap forward in ending hunger and poverty in our world? And the Hunger Project, time and again, year by year, decade by decade, examines the situation in the world, where that big wave is, and tries to identify what the Hunger Project can provide. And to give you a snapshot of the last 42 years, in the first decade, what was clearly missing and cited by numerous studies was the political will and commitment to end world hunger. And that we launched one of the biggest communication, education campaigns to generate that global will and commitment. And if anyone was at Live Aid concert in 1985, it was pretty evident that we were mobilizing a huge will and commitment to end hunger. At that same time, our teams were touring all over Africa and hearing, that's great and that's not enough. The ways that we've been thinking about combating hunger are so dysfunctional, the policies of our own governments are so dysfunctional that you could triple your aid budgets and it would just make matters worse. So we launched a second phase, which really pioneered bottom-up, holistic strategies that worked with communities to set their own priorities, to understand their own situation, and start coming up with their own solutions. And we developed that over this decade. And then, anybody knows what happened in 1995?
1995.
Tom?
The Asian Enigma.
Yeah.
That was shortly thereafter.
That was
The Beijing Women's Conference. Joan Holmes, our founding president, was at the Beijing Women's Conference with a whole delegation of women from the Hunger Project. And she got us on the line and said, I don't know how, but I do know everything in the Hunger Project is going to change. Because she saw that the deeply entrenched patriarchy, the deeply entrenched subjugation, marginalization, and disempowerment of women was the root cause. And then a paper came out called The Asian Enigma that Tom was referring to that emphasized that, and we then really began integrating into our bottom-up strategies very intentional and powerful interventions determined by women at the front lines of women's rights in each of those regions as the highest leverage actions we could take to change those gender relations, to create more equality in each region. And that took us a number of years to figure that all out, and we got that rolling. But by 2007, it was pretty evident that our strategies were working. Women were getting empowered, communities were taking charge of their own lives and destiny. The challenge was, how on earth can we scale this up? Because at that time, when we met with all of our Africa country directors in 2005, and we said, well, how about the government taking it on? And they all laughed in unison at our naivete. But it was the beginning of a number of international meetings that did lead to countries starting to take responsibility for their own policies. And we started to see what glimmers of what that pathway might be. And then in recent years, it's become clear that there are pathways, and you're going to hear about them today. There have been countries that have scaled up women-centered grassroots strategies to national scale. That has happened in a number of countries, and we can start to build the collaboration at scale that would be necessary to cause that to happen. Okay, who knows what this is? Heather.
Is the Sustainable Development Goals?
Right. These are the Sustainable Development Goals. In September 25th of 2015, the world community signed on to a set of 17 goals to transform our world, to build a world that would be sustainable, that would support people, the planet, peacemaking, a set of goals that was bigger than the previous set of goals, the Millennium Development Goals, and explicitly was way stronger on gender equality, much stronger on the environment, much stronger on urgent action on climate change. And for us in the Hunger Project, most thrilling of all, zero hunger by 2030, which is technically possible. However, it can only be done by really an integrated strategy that moves forward on all these goals at once.
John, what is the measure of zero hunger?
Okay, there are 169 targets and 250 indicators. So there's not one number for zero hunger. But there is a framework of 5 different targets that the FAO is working on. So I would like someone, see, where do we have a mic? Another mic. Yes. This is a quote from the Sustainable Development Goal Declaration, and I'd like someone to read it out. D.
All countries and all stakeholders acting in collaborative partnership will implement this plan. We are resolved to free the human race from the tyranny of poverty and want, and to heal and secure our planet. We are determined to take the bold and transformative steps which are urgently needed to shift the world onto a sustainable and resilient path.
Let that sink in. If you're wondering why I called you all together today, it's I want you to do this. It is, and particularly in an organization and with a group of people who know something about transformation, you probably have already had the thought that our world leaders who signed this Sustainable Development Goals have no idea the kind of transformation that's going to be required. It is a profound transformation, on our how we consume, what kind of vehicles we use, how we live our lives in the rich world, how people live their lives in the unrich world, the kinds of transformation of resource allocations that's going to be required. It's a big deal, and it's possible, and in many places it's happening. So the Hunger Project on our website has 10 principles that are extremely relevant to this. One is the recognition that of these deeply entrenched forces. So I'd like somebody else to read out our Principle 7 on social transformation. Yes, Nancy?
People's self-reliance is suppressed by conditions such as corruption, armed conflict, racism, and the subjugation of women. These are all rooted in an age-old and nearly universal patriarchal mindset that must be transformed as part of a fundamental shift in the way society is organized.
Thank you, Nancy. Then we have this. So how do I do that? How do you do that? And it's a field of a particular kind of leadership. So I'd like somebody to read out this one, please. Just raise your hand and maybe look at them. Yes, Susan. Oh, no, you got beaten by somebody in the back.
Sorry about that, Susan. Transformative leadership. Ending hunger requires a new kind of leadership, not top-down, authority-based leadership. Leadership that awakens people to their own power. Leadership with people rather than over people.
So this is one of the keys to the art of partnership. If one goes out and they're the out front, strong, emblematic leader, not a lot of partnership is likely to happen. A lot of followership can happen, a lot of good things can happen, but that's not what's needed for the art of partnership. We need a style of partnership that's with people, that awakens people to their own power. So our mission is to end hunger and poverty by pioneering sustainable grassroots, women-centered strategies and advocating for their widespread adoption in countries throughout the world. And we're going to be hearing from an awesome panel shortly about both aspects of this mission statement. Sorry?
Thank you very much.
One of the things that, as we were going through our continuous reinvention, Rowlands, Kaotcha, and I and others were in a meeting, and we were puzzling over this conundrum that there were little pockets of money available for fighting poverty or hunger or gender equality or clean water or solar energy. You could find little project grants, but that big blue circle of mobilizing communities, awakening a spirit of self-reliance, transforming mindsets, overcoming patriarchy. That big human effort didn't even have a shared name, and it certainly didn't have any funding windows. There was no place where you go and apply for money for an 8-year program to transform the psychosocial conditions which the poor live their lives. And as a result of there being no money, there was no collective discourse among organizations that believed in this. There was no common language. We all felt very alone and very frustrated, and we each had our own sort of jargon. And then in the year 2012, a number of articles came out that had been requested by the governments of Canada and New Zealand for how they should interact with their own First Nations, their own indigenous populations. And they described this process of transforming mindsets and mobilizing communities, a process, not a project. And they called it community-led development. And a whole group of us that had been lobbying for these kind of things to be included in the Sustainable Development Goals said, okay, there's a literature, can we rally under this umbrella? And lots of groups did. So we created a thing called the Movement for Community-Led Development on the recognition that development is local. And here are our 5 goals. Voice and agency for women, youth, and marginalized groups. A second is adequate community finance. You know, the Hunger Project, when it mobilizes an epicenter, it spends a certain amount of money in partnership with that community to make that happen. The governments are not currently sharing their resources outside the capital city. In our part of the world, half of public budgets are in the hands of local communities. In the kinds of places where the Hunger Project works, it's maybe only 2 or 3% of public resources are in the hands of local communities. It has to be at least 20% to see the kind of change that will meet the Sustainable Development Goals. There needs to be good local governance, and by that we mean public forums, elected local councils, the ability to hold your local government to account, the ability to volunteer and work in partnership with government. All those things that go into good governance are largely missing. Quality public service becomes a result of that in our epicenters and other Hunger Project communities. People really spend time making sure the clinic works, that the teachers show up to schools, that there are quality services available so that people can meet their own basic needs. And then finally, resilience. In this time of climate change and increasing disasters hitting communities, every community in the world needs to adapt to those challenges and develop, the trained volunteers, like the Red Cross, Red Crescent, those kind of things that can deal with emergencies where they happen. We've often seen, like when a flood hits our Bangladesh communities, the animators are there. They can take action today. They don't have to wait for someone to come and rescue them. So all those 5 goals are our goals in this larger movement.
By when?
Well, all those have kind of got to be in place, I would say, by 2026, and we're going to hit 2030. So this is for those of you who are in the social sciences, this is our super simplified theory of change. We want community-led development for everyone, mobilizing those communities is a full-time job for someone. So we need real partnerships among organizations that are able to mobilize communities. And if we're doing that everywhere, their own government and that government's aid partners is going to have to bless that process. And to do that, we need partnerships doing advocacy. So all this has to come together, and that's what is that. Those 2 big blue arrows is what the Movement for Community-Led Development does. At its board meeting in 2015, the Hunger Project identified that the essence of our strategic plan for this 5-year period would be to build the large-scale partnerships and alliances to empower gender-focused, community-led rural development everywhere it's needed. And the Hunger Project, fortunately, has some real experience with building those partnerships.
John, this, for example, is this a Hunger Project statement or an SDG statement?
This is a Hunger Project
That's what I
statement.
thought.
That's us with the lever there. So back in 1979 and 1980, the late, great Valerie Harper was part of a team with Joan Holmes and others who brought world attention with dozens of organizations to work together to then meet ultimately with the US government and respond to famines in Cambodia and in Somalia. We partnered with the Martin Luther King Foundation to start 5 years later to really start to build a spirit of partnership between the United States and the people of Africa. We built our entire India program as a set of partnerships with now, I think, more than 40 local community-based organizations, all working with the same strategy, the same workshops, the same training to empower women leaders in local communities. And as of today, the Movement for Community-Led Development has a membership globally of 64 major international organizations. Some of you will recognize some of them. Some of them are small and you've probably never heard of them, but they're all aligned with this commitment to community-led development. In addition, they are working to set up national chapters in as many countries as possible, in Hunger Project countries and non-Hunger Project countries, to really engage their own governments, local people advocating for change in their local countries.
John?
Yes?
Question. So do you mean that all of these organizations are in communication now and have agreed to these goals and are working together?
Yes.
Wow.
Now, that's not to say, their total budgets are $6 billion a year.
Mm-hmm.
But the amount of that budget that goes towards community-led development is very small because they have business models of government grants and other big grants that say, you will do just this slice, strengthening the incomes of left-handed rabbit raisers on the eastern coast. So they share a belief that this is the right way to do development, and they share a frustration that the donors aren't funding it. And so they're willing and eager to work together to compile the evidence, to develop the strategies, to interact with both governments in country and donor governments to really start to, and we're starting to see that happen. Yes?
So you have common objectives. What about common processes?
You will hear a lot about that today. Yes, Bridge.
Is the Hunger Project acknowledged as one of the pioneer organizations that brought forth the idea of partnership with the hungry people, and what's missing is opportunity, the whole radical shift?
What the members loudly and sometimes even embarrassingly acknowledge us for creating this movement and driving this process forward. So it was, for instance, there was recently a study with by an external consulting firm who talked to a bunch of outside experts who said, a movement like this is needed, it's missing, and the Hunger Project is the one that's doing it. So it's that aspect of our hopefully transformative leadership is widely acknowledged. And we're wanting more and more people to step forward with their leadership from those groups every day. And that's happening too. Yes.
So we all know that collaboration takes a lot of dedication and resources. How is this impacting the Hunger Project's capacity, taking on the leadership role to oversee this kind of juncture of all these organizations?
The people in this room are really smart. So that is a challenge. And what's been very exciting is that in the last year, and you'll hear more about this in a moment, is that we have restructured our own leadership and our own budgets to be able to support that, as have some other organizations. Global Communities, for example, they anchor, that's another organization that's up there under the G's. Global Communities anchors our movement in Kenya. The Hunger Project is not in Kenya. Kenya is a very strategic country to be in, and Global Communities is devoting several full-time equivalent staff member people to make the movement succeed in Kenya.
What sort of action do they take then there?
Great question. So there are 8 streams of activities. If you go to communityleddev.org website, we have something called a manifesto, and in that manifesto it outlines 8 groups. You'll hear about some of the activities, but it ranges from just strengthening these national chapters, getting local organizations well organized, to gathering evidence. And I know at the last board of directors meeting, this one of my colleagues named Gunjan, who has mobilized 35 evaluation professionals to do a synthesis across 350 evaluations of community-led relevant studies to distill the lessons learned and be able to smack them down on finance ministers' desks and say, see, this is why you should be doing this. So all the aspects of achieving those 2 full arrows. Another activity, and one of our favorites, just was launched, and you'll hear about it a little later today, and that is building consortiums of groups to work together using these processes in a way that could go to scale and engage the government. Any other questions before we go on? Yes?
It's just a comment that we're just starting to co-apply for institutional funding. So organizations that have massive budgets and credibility, and the Hunger Project's role in this, we're co-applying, and so we're vouching for community-led development to big institutional funders, and that helps.
So we're a $20 million global organization spread over all of our countries. Nobody is likely to give that organization a $20 million grant. They would like to keep giving us $25,000 grants. But if we go in partnership with World Vision or Save the Children that get $20 million grants all the time for those left-handed rabbit raisers, then we could really do something big together. And that's what Jason's working on. Okay, we're going to move right along. I'd like to bring up our awesome panel, please. So, please have a seat. So, just an introductory introduction. Montse is our new country director in THP Mexico, and you'll hear more from her in just a minute. Rowlands, Kaotcha, how many, are all of you coming tonight?
Yeah.
Yes. You'll hear Rowland's new title tonight. We're unveiling it. Among his current titles is that he is our Southern Africa Regional Director for the Hunger Project. And Hendrix-Jenkins is my colleague, and she is our senior advisor on the Movement for Community-Led Development, has a wealth of experience in movement and collaboration building. And Mary Kay Costellow is our senior policy advisor and chief UN representative, and you'll be hearing more from her too. So this will be sort of talk show style. We've actually talked about it a little ahead, so we're actually prepared. We have some videos to show you to connect you with the work in the field. But first I want to spend a little more time introducing one of my newest colleagues, which is Montse. Montse actually came to the Hunger Project. I met her when she was not in the Hunger Project. So they launched their movement for community-led development last 2017, and 2017 in August. Does anybody know what happened in Mexico in August of 2017?
Earthquake.
Yes. So our movement for community-led development rapidly transformed into the movement for community-led earthquake recovery, which is very important actually, because Mexico had a track record of doing very community inappropriate recovery, where somebody from top down would dictate what to do. So Montse, can you tell us a little bit about this whole effort, and then the earthquake recovery and what brought you into the Hunger Project?
Thank you, John, for introducing me. And I will share you how the movement have give us this opportunity to connect with another base organization, because when the reconstruction funds and all the deals with the government get to the communities was a very, very mess. A lot of communities was all fell down. The schools still fell down in Mexico in some communities. So when we are very focused in how to build the laws to build again or to reconstruct again our communities, but leading by the communities people, not by the government laws. So we were trying to have some meetings with the government, and we put the CLD, the community-led development, focused gender community-led development inside of these reconstruction laws. Right now, it's approved that all the reconstruction are including their voice and the participation of their owner of their houses, because they used to take all the opportunities to not listen all these people. They rebuild their houses what they want, and what they want to do it, not listening the necessity of the communities. So right now we are very proud that we can have this option, because we put this CLD in advocacy in another laws, and we are very
and
proud.
how many groups were participating?
Was like a 25 NGOs that have base labor. So
base refers to grassroots.
Yeah, grassroots, and other like 5 or 6 was making advocacy, because THP wasn't rebuilding something, but we have the leadership with all these organizations. So someone was making the advocacy things, another was in the recovering and checking all these kind of funds and credit cards that the government gave us and all the things.
Wow. And you had told, see, I need a second mic, thanks. So you had told me yesterday what you were working on before joining the Hunger Project, that now the Hunger Project has integrated into its strategy regarding Mexico's constitution.
The last 8 years before I get to THP, I was working in a social entrepreneurs that make advocacy also, and we put in our article, in the third article in our constitution, educational article, we put the education for sustainable development inside of our education system. So the last December, they approved that modification in our constitution. Right now, we are moving forward to achieve that this will real in the curricula and also in the schools. So right now we will present at Chile this experience, and also THP right now is the guardian of this could be real in the rural communities, because all the time in the political system they think in urban areas, not in the rural areas. Right now with my hat with THP, because now I am here, so I am the guardian to have this opportunity to put all the things that the communities need and all the childs need to learn about the CLD.
That's fabulous. One of the most exciting innovations that I think the entire world of the Hunger Project is learning from and was recently presented to all the members of the movement is something called the School for CLD. So could you tell a little bit about the School for CLD, and then we'll show a video about the School for CLD.
Another thing that I don't want to mess about the reconstruction, a little bit before, the leadership about the woman in the reconstruction was amazing. The women was the more powerful tools or tools to make the reconstruction function, because 1 or 2 weeks the women will be helping to their families or the men could go to work, but the woman is still working in the reconstruction. So the woman in the communities is more powerful than ever in these kind of things.
Great.
And when we talk about the municipal school for focused genders CLD, is to strengthen the participatory local democracy, because we know and we are knowing and understanding that the development happens in the communities. So in this school we have the opportunity to do it in 3 states of Mexico: Oaxaca, San Luis, and Chiapas. We are starting with Chiapas. And we also, the objective of this is active citizen, social cohesion, and governance with the municipalities. So to do this is the intention to influence the municipality plans. It's not only having our vision with our communities, they need to scale up these kind of things, because if they have water systems or building homes or households or something like that, they need to ask for the municipal authority to do it, not THP, not the communities. So this school is teaching them or helping them to understand what is their rights and how they can ask for the municipal authorities to do it. So right now is almost starting the second generation of this, and it will be focused on gender and gender equality, because the political participation of women is none in Mexico. They put a list and they can have some names, Margarita, Faustina, or someone, but in the meetings they couldn't speak. So it's a simulation. It's a fake. So we are trying to make this by the roots, by the local government, and in the national office we are doing up with federal government.
Fabulous. So we're going to show a 5-minute video, and it's in Spanish, but there's subtitles. So those Spanish speakers in the house? Any Spanish? Yay!
Todos.
Nos sentimos muy contentos de que ellos hayan llegado a nuestras comunidades y que nosotros mismos también hayamos creído que se pueda lograr que las comunidades se unan o se empiecen a organizar.
Ya que ha fortalecido también la valentía y el valor que tenemos como mujeres dentro de esta escuela, pues la participación pues ha sido muy enriquecido para nosotros.
The Hunger Project es una organización a nivel global. Trabajamos en 22 países en el mundo y la misión que la organización creó cuando fue fundada es contribuir con estrategias para el fin del hambre y la pobreza en el mundo.
En las comunidades realmente muchas veces existe el machismo. A las mujeres se les cierra la posibilidad de trabajar, de participar y de colaborar en algunos trabajos, ¿no? Entonces prácticamente en estos conocimientos, en esta escuela, realmente pues se nos fortaleció como mujeres.
Nosotros no teníamos visión, vivíamos, cada quien trabajaba por su cuenta, pero ahorita lo actual es que pues también hemos asistido a una escuela de liderazgo comunitario. Ahí aprendimos nuestros derechos, equidad de género. THP nos ha enseñado muchas cosas, de que nosotros seamos sustentables, que nosotros mismos hagamos las cosas por sí solas, que no dependamos de alguien.
Nos dieron el conocimiento con THP, pues de que nosotros como mujeres, como jóvenes también tenemos ese derecho de participar, y pues hasta la fecha ahora pues yo sigo con THP y la verdad yo estoy muy agradecida de la organización, porque igual yo como líder también yo estoy viendo el cambio que ha tenido mi comunidad, la gente, los jóvenes.
Participamos de una iniciativa de los programas de colaboración entre la Unión Europea y México que se llama Laboratorio de Cohesión Social, y en el marco de ese programa de cooperación internacional nosotros establecimos una experiencia piloto, y por un periodo de 18 meses la escuela funcionó con sesiones de manera mensuales. Tocamos distintos temas, desde un entendimiento compartido común acerca de pobreza, de desarrollo, de cohesión social, de democracia, de derechos humanos, construir una perspectiva de género, y hablamos de gobernanza, que son conceptos que parecen traídos de fuera, pero que existen en las comunidades. Después de 18 meses y de desarrollar 8 módulos temáticos, graduamos a la primera generación de la escuela. Entonces, nuestro trabajo en una etapa que llamamos el despertar, justo es romper la resignación, decimos nosotros, de que por ser mujer no puedo, por ser indígena no sé, o por ser pobre, pobre seguiré, e inspirar a las personas, llamarles a su liderazgo y construir una estrategia de empoderamiento individual y colectivo para reconocer que es posible terminar con el hambre, es posible salir de una situación de opresión, es posible salir de una situación de violencia, y no solo depende del esfuerzo individual, y por eso decimos que es una cuestión colectiva.
Bueno, yo le diría a mi comunidad que siguiéramos manteniendo la unión, porque unidos podemos hacer más cosas y alcanzar nuestras metas.
El hombre y la mujer valen lo mismo.
Reconozco que soy una mujer luchadora y que voy a seguir luchando y poder seguir poniendo ese gran granito de arena en mi comunidad.
Los hombres y mujeres mazatecos son personas muy fuertes, son personas de un carácter muy decidido. Por eso nosotros vemos que el liderazgo de las personas en la región es muy determinante, ¿no? Cuando alguien ofrece su palabra, se compromete, lo hace verdaderamente. Entonces, lo que nosotros llamamos catalizadores, pues es una red de líderes comunitarios que empeñaron su palabra en llevar adelante esa visión y hacer que su comunidad la alcance. Entonces habla de un carácter muy fuerte, ¿no?
So, thank you, Montse. And anything you can say about what has happened since this first generation of the school in terms of opening doors?
Right now, we have 2 agendas of this school, and we are moving a lot of meetings with 5 ministries in Mexico, because if we didn't have these kind of things or we kind of tools, the government right now it's not believing in NGOs in Mexico. They declare that we are corrupted, that we are the worst thing in the world. So THP has the opportunity in Mexico to show these kind of tools, and the government it's very surprising about our methodology. So they are opening up their doors, and it's difficult right now, and we are very lucky because we have a very good reputation. Lorena makes a lot of big reputation in Mexico. So we are talking about with the Ministry of Education, the State Office, in a poverty lab that we will give us the opportunity to scale up this methodology with the environmental issues and the social issues, and also with 4 UN agencies. They are very, very interested about this and put the money in some of other states that we are not doing right now, but they want to put money over there. So there's a way that we can scale up to make more things, not only with the THP team or staff. We are making to spread our methodology with another ministries to go up.
Excellent. Okay, some of you have already seen this and have started adding a word to describe what you sort of where you're at so far in this session, because we're at the halfway point.
And one last thing, I want because I
empowered woman here.
Yeah, sorry. Sorry. One last thing is that we have the opportunity to be in the Nobel Prize Summit the last 2 weeks. So it was an amazing experience, but we have the chance to speak with the governor and with the social issues secretary. So they understand what is the way that we are doing, and he is asking us to be the consultant for the government to have a midterm evaluation on how to turn the social programs in the state. And Yucatan, where was the summit, is the best state in America to live before Quebec, I guess.
Right.
So this will be a very, very huge opportunity to have the evidence for another states. We can do it in the middle or at the beginning of any government. So this is a very good opportunity to work.
That's exciting. For those of you who follow international conferences, Montse was talking about how the Hunger Project Mexico is going to be representing the Hunger Project globally at a number of important international conferences coming up in Nairobi, the Population and Development Conference in Chile, the Climate Change Conference. So we are a true global family, and who represents us in various conferences, and this has been so for a long time, is often Rowlands or Montse or someone not in New York or DC. So with that, I want to turn to Rowlands, and he's going to talk with us a bit about the work in Malawi and in Zambia, which is something most of you maybe don't know that we were doing stuff in. So, Rowlands, how many of you have visited a Hunger Project Epicenter? And how many of you don't know what the Epicenter methodology is? Okay, so Rowlands, if you would just start off by giving a sort of a brief overview of the Epicenter strategy.
Thank you. So the Epicenter strategy, the main focus of the Epicenter strategy is the rural people, those that are living in the state of poverty and hunger. So everything around the Epicenter strategy revolves on this community. so that they drive the process themselves, they own it and drive it. We believe in the epicenter strategy that person living in hunger and poverty is not a problem. He or she is actually the solution to the problem. And the epicenter strategy is organized in 4 phases. Okay, now they look so distinct and academical here, but when they are being done on the ground, all right, you can't be able to draw a line and then it ends here, it starts from here. You might find overlaps, but they are distinct 4 phases. The first phase is what we call mobilization. That is the most important part of our work. Why is it important? It is because this is where we do community mobilization. This is where we do vision, commitment, and action workshops for mindset change. Most of the communities we work with have been born in a condition of hunger. They have seen their parents, their grandparents, and they are on a point where they believe that hunger and poverty cannot end. And yet, those are the communities that are the primary resource for the end of hunger. So how do we make sure that we work with such communities so that their inside ability is unleashed and they become masters of their own destiny? And we conduct those VCA workshop processes. When I'm explaining them, they look like a simple, straightforward process, but they are not easy. And we have to do them over and over and over again. But through time, we've now found the magic of doing it, where now it doesn't have to involve us as people on staff. Okay, we identify what we call community volunteers, and these are animators within the community that are able to conduct that process even when we are not there. And that helps that the process should still continue. It is more authentic and you have a deeper and a wider reach. So that's the first part. The second part is where now we create infrastructure which is missing. Okay, so there is access. I think John spoke about access to basic services and all that. So that's the second stage, and in an infrastructure like that one, which is a multi-purpose infrastructure, it's a mobilization center. So the first phase I spoke about is the epicenter at conceptual as an area. Then there is an epicenter as an infrastructure at an imaginary central village, so that each one of the community can be able to access services from that center. They come to that center, they get training in farming, in modern farming technology, in sustainability. They have access to health, they have access to education. There is a community food bank there, so it builds resilience. If there's a disaster, they don't have to go out, some of them hire out labor. They know they have a place which ensures community resilience to access to food as they are waiting for the government for 3 months to respond to them. There's a health facility, so women now are able to walk a short distance to be able to find a decent place where they can deliver their children. In most of the places that we come from, women have had to walk very long distances. These are areas where when a woman is actually doing a noble job of bringing life into this world, their own lives were being put at risk. You're talking of figures of about 1,250 women dying out of every 100,000 women who are attempting to give birth, all because of poor access to specialized and health services which are good. Now, a number may look like a number, but even when it's 15 or 10, what we have to know is you're talking about the life of a human being. So it's not a number. So that's why those infrastructure, there is a credit room and there's a community hall. So there's a lot that happens there. After the training, they take what is happening at the epicenter and apply it into their community villages. The third stage is what we call program implementation. This is now where we start seeing changes. Now, I normally divide these 4 into 2 parts. There is a software part of the change process, and there is a hardware part. And John spoke about those petals, and then the blue thing at the middle, right? We remember that one, right?
Yes. Yes.
Now, That blue thing in the middle, that's the fabric. That's what causes those petals to work. And that part is what I've explained in phase 1. However, most of the times when funding is coming from donors and all that, it starts at the hardware part. So that's actually moving from phase 2, going into phase 3. Now you start seeing production has increased, farm yield has increased from X to Y. You know, this access to what has improved from Z to J. And most of the times, funding goes at that stage and misses part 1. And yet that is the part that actually drives those changes if everything has to be sustainable. If you only inject the funding at phase 3, that's why we discover that you can see it in year 1, you leave, after 2 years you come back, you check, you discover that it has gone back to where it started because you didn't work in the social fabric on which that hardware process takes place. The 4th stage is the issue of sustainability. Now, I mentioned earlier on that even though it looks like distinct, but these are really intertwined. So we don't only start talking about sustainability in phase 4. No, we start talking about sustainability in phase 1. Remember I said that we have animators, we have local leadership, we have various committees, and we have the community members themselves driving the process. That is a very important factor of sustainability. It shows up in the phase 4 if you don't do a good job in phase 1. Because in phase 4 now we are talking of transitioning towards self-reliance, where the Hunger Project withdraws. The epicenter is able to operate at 100%, above 100% operational self-sufficiency. They can generate money and make their own income and support their own services. They transition to become an institution because in phase 1 to 3, we are using the name of the Hunger Project. So we are using the legality of the Hunger Project. But now after we have withdrawn, what do they become? Are they an entity that they can be able to transact with government, transact with people, transact with investors and everybody? So they transition into an institution and they become community development organization and they own it. You know, and then they get registered and the Ministry of Finance issues them a certificate. So they can knock at the door of a local government. The local government will listen. They will not just be loose people or loose association. They will listen and they will know that they have a legal mandate to be able to transact with us and the local government cannot bypass them. That's what happens in phase 4, and then we have withdrawn and they go into what we call a post-self-reliance phase, where we monitor them for 2 years. And after 2 years, we're completely out. And the good news now, we have actually epicenters in Malawi which reached self-reliance in 2016. This is the 3rd year, and there is a study going on to check and say how sustainable are they, and are they still doing good? And I tell you, I'm waiting for the day that that report will come out because I know they are doing really, really good. Some of them even more than the way they were doing when we were there. Right. So that's the process of the epicenter strategy. This is actually that's the minister. Excuse me, sorry. This is the minister of a very key government ministry in Malawi, Ministry of Local Government and Rural Development. Why that? Because that's the key ministry that is mandated to work with the rural people in the country. And so even when we're inviting ministries, targeting ministries for the functions that we have, we are very strategic because we knew that this is the ministry that is mandated. And on this day, he came to inaugurate an epicenter which has reached self-reliant. And on that particular day, we signed a memorandum of understanding with the ministry on how the Hunger Project and the ministry are going to do a policy integration so that we feed into the work of the ministry, because the ministry was operating more on phase 3 and phase 4 and they had missed phase 1 and phase 2. So how do we do a policy integration process so that the rural growth center models which the ministry is doing benefits from the phase 1 and phase 2 of the expertise of the Hunger Project, and we signed it on that particular day.
So we're now going to watch a short video. One of the most inspiring parts of the Epicenter strategy is the women's literacy. Anything you want to say before I press the go button?
No, John, thank you.
Dine Margaret Chabweteka ndegala yake liyali ndili wang'ono sindathe kulemba ndikwerenga fa makolo wanga adali ovutika ndi adandisiya kumwalira ndikukwatula ndi bambo amene ndali nawo ndi adandisiya sadamwalira chaka chino chatene koma ndisakutha kuwerenga ndipo sindimatha kugona usiku wonse umene ndimakhala ndikuganizana kuti kodi ndidzadziwa kulemba dzina langa, kodi ndidzadziwa kuwerenga. Nditabwera project nkhanga kuyamba skulu ine nalolera ukalowa nawo. Lero ntamva dzanali kuti amayi mwapambana. Lero ine ndakhala nkhati kapena ndili kwina kwake dziko lina lachilendo. Lero ndikuliyembekezera loti ine ndikasangalale. Ndilibe sabateli yose kati kakavala zijazi balibe kantu komano kwathu kuno. Ndipo ndimanyada nalo ndikamaenda. Chimene chindisangalatsa kwambiri kuona anzanga mmene amachitira kuwerenga. Ine ndimakhumbirana naso nditawerenga. Nchoti magulu ali osobwerawo ndidzikhala nawo sindikhala opatuka chifukwa ndikudziwa kulemba.
Tell us what is going on with this slide.
Thank you. So this slide, this is 2015, and at this particular time we had a panel discussion. So we had the ministry in that, we had the private sector, we had the media, and we also had representation from the civil society and the young people. The main topic on that particular day was localization of the Sustainable Development Goals in Malawi. This was beamed live on TV. We asked tough questions on that particular panel discussion. They were answered openly. During that time, we had the Global Board of Directors visit in Malawi. And so we took advantage of that and say, hey, our Global Board of Directors are here, and we're going to have a meeting and all that. You know, we used the presence of the Global Board of Directors, and so the Principal Secretary of the government couldn't say no. We had the country representative of the United Nations, UNDP, who actually came and gave a keynote, so it was really high level. And we used that even to corner the ministry to commit to a process, which after that we took advantage of that commitment and said, this is what you said clearly on TV. And as we speak now, we actually have a movement of community-led development chapter in Malawi, one of the results that came out of that particular process. But to put up that, 3 non-government organizations had to work together. So we championed the process, but we worked with institutions like World Vision, we also worked with HEIFA International to come up with a strategic way of handling that. And you see me standing here with a lady, and that colleague of mine was coming from World Vision, and we co-facilitated the event to make sure that, you know, it's not, you see, my partners, it's not about me. Yes, our name is important, but we should always ask ourselves a question. It's about who? When we discern that, we will discover that it goes beyond our identities. It's about that woman, about that man, about that girl, about that boy who is living and struggling in conditions of hunger and poverty. That's the main reason. Thank you.
So one of the outcomes that has occurred recently that both Rowlands and Anne have been involved with was, as I mentioned in the beginning, our vision isn't to have the Hunger Project go and do epicenters in every single village in the world. We want to share our methodology with others and have it widespread adoption. And the first place that that's starting to happen is Zambia, a country that borders Malawi, a country where there's Friends of the Hunger Project. There are African Prize laureates, there are people who have known about the Hunger Project, and so now, just recently, things launched. So tell us about what's happening in Zambia.
It has been a long journey.
Yeah.
You know it, John. Some of the trips we did them together. Going there, speak to individual organizations. I don't know, this other particular day we had lots of meetings. And eventually we've come to a point now where we can talk about what we'll be talking now. So even in the process that I'll be explaining, yes, it's high level, but it also had its own phase one, which was a one-to-one meeting to officers, talk to them and discuss and all that, to the point where now we have the next slide that will be showing. And so last week, we had a launch of a national chapter in Zambia. So the CLD chapter is actually launched in Zambia. On that particular picture, on the right-hand side, that's the investor of our program in Zambia. And then on the left-hand side here, this is the principal secretary, right? Principal secretary from the Ministry of Community Development and Social Services. And she gave a powerful speech. They endorsed the movement. And by that particular time, we were now all of that signing on the banner. And a total of 20, how many NGOs? A total of 25 institutions on the first day of the founding of this, of the launching of this national chapter, had already signed up for the movement in Zambia. Then the following day, we traveled 550 kilometers one way, and then took a 10 and drove another 2.5 hours on a really rough road to launch now the consortium, implementation consortium of the first epicenter in Zambia. And that epicenter is being implemented by 3 institutions: the Hunger Project, HEIFA International Zambia, and Restless Development Zambia. Thank you.
Thank you, and congratulations. Also, we should point out, in addition to Nikki's family's investment in this first epicenter, Heifer themselves are putting $1 million into this first epicenter. So it's really an exciting, true partnership. So Anne, who's, I mentioned, I have long admired, I met Anne 10 years ago when she worked with a group called Core Group, which is a community of practice of organizations working together on community health. So it has a lot of similarities, and she has experience with a lot of both the practice and the principles of partnership. So Anne has a lot to say now because she was part of both of these launchings. So Anne, tell us about how to create systemic change.
Okay, nice. I have been working in development for 30 years. I started in 1988 as a Peace Corps volunteer. And I am just as idealistic as that first day as a Peace Corps volunteer, but I'm a little more experienced / jaded with regards to the way that a lot of development unfolds. So it is really an honor and a pleasure for me to be working with the Hunger Project now since February. And in Zambia, being able to show up at the last minute after all the groundwork was done to celebrate this new effort, this new dual effort. And it's really a testament to the Hunger Project that since 1977, never losing that original focus on the importance of mindset and consciousness, but always evolving. So now this evolving model in Zambia, which includes both the grassroots, the bottom up, and the national movement, which is the top down, is really unique and cutting edge in the world of development. So just a little bit about how we think about this work so that it really it makes a very practical difference, because that's another thing I love about the Hunger Project. It's always got to have a practical measurement of things really changing. So we talk now at the national level about how to create systemic change so that community-led development can reach all the people of a country. And you know, as John said, Hunger Project can't do it alone, nor heifer, nor anyone. And also governments are usually the biggest and most potentially powerful and sustainable partners in community-led development in the long term. So historically, you have that chart up there, the 6 conditions of systems change. Historically, development focuses a lot on the structural change, which is the explicit change. So we talk about policies, practices, and resources. So policy for for decentralization, for example, is very critical to community-led development. But as international development people, stopping or staying there is a major error, and an error that we don't make, I'm glad to say, because below that is what really drives it, which is this semi-explicit level, which is that relationships and connections and power dynamics are the things that make that top level possible. No policy gets into place because some international development person showed up with the policy all written out, ready to go. Even though we have tried that. It turns out that you need to link into the relationships and connections and power dynamics in order to get those policies into place. But the policies are not enough, because if the resources are not there, the best policy in the world is useless. So it needs to really have the Ministry of Finance involved. And then ultimately the practice happens, which would be the decentralization and the other aspects of national level policy that affect whether or not community-led development happens. But can anyone guess what the bottom level is, the most important level of all when it comes to creating systemic change? Mindset, yes, this crowd knows best of all. So the idea is that the transformative change is not going to happen unless the mental models are there. And when we're talking at the national level, that's the mental models of key political people and other influential stakeholders at the national level. So as Rowlands already sort of described, we do a lot of work with trying to focus on that mental models piece so that the transformative change can happen. So to give a sort of practical examples of what this looks like, you can go to the next slide. This was in the movement for community-led development in Zambia. So As he described, we had a national level launch event, and then we had the community level launch event in the district of Vubwi. And so these are just an example of the different stakeholders that you need to have on board as partners in order to make something like this really foster transformative, sustainable change. The man on the left, who we all love so much by now, his name is Chief Pemba Moyo, yes. And he is the chief of the district where we were working, and a very supportive guy, and very interested in supporting this effort and understanding it well and providing the local leadership. So we, of course, had to work with him very closely. Rowlands already mentioned Mrs. Pamela Kimbaba, who is the permanent secretary of the Ministry of Community Development and Social Services. So she was on board and made a public statement of commitment in the Lusaka event. We have a woman down in the lower left-hand corner who it turns out is super involved, and she is from the University of Zambia, and she's doing social science research on agency in Zambia. We had the mayor of Vubwi, who is very supportive of our work, and he was there multiple days. We had people from the Ministry of Health who are committed to community development as a critical aspect of health programming. And we had in the center, you see the people of Vubwi. Obviously they are the most important and the center of it all, but they can't do it by themselves. They need all this help. And an interesting part is in the top right corner there. That is the brand new building, which is the district office of the district of Vubwi, the district where Vubwi is. And that did not exist until recently, because the government of Zambia is decentralizing, and they have added about 40 new districts. So Vubwi has a district. And very important to our work there is our partnership with the district commissioner, who came and supported our epicenter launch. And you see that little tarred road? They have about a half a kilometer of tarred road in Vubwi now, right in front of the district center. They had all that equipment out there, and they only did a half a kilometer, but it's a start, right? So there's things happening, but unless they come together in a dynamic and crystallized way that is driven by the people of Vubwi and their immediate and long-term needs, it will continue to be fragmented work that doesn't necessarily reach its potential. So next slide. This is the list of the 25 organizations that we had sign up to be members of the National Movement for Community-Led Development in Zambia, and it's a great group, including several groups in there that are led by community members, by low-income people, and we had one person on our panel who was super outspoken, and everybody loved her, who was from the Poor People's Group, which interestingly enough was started by 8 women in India. So there's a lot of dynamic potential here, and one thing that we really pointed out during this event is never have these organizations or this type of mix of organizations come together on behalf of the people of a country before, and all the potential and enthusiasm that is represented by all of them stepping forward. And during the day we had a lot more who also said they wanted to sign up and become part of it. Next is this idea that can you go to the next slide actually, and I'll come back to this, is this idea that, okay, once you have everyone together and they're so enthusiastic, how do you organize it in a very practical and meaningful way? And there's something, if you haven't heard of it, called the collective impact approach, capital C, capital I, it's evidence-based, and it has 5 multiple elements that stakeholders use to work together to produce transformative systemic change. So we use the collective impact approach as our guide. There's infinite amounts of material on the internet about it, so if you're interested, it is a really, it seems like almost too simple up here, but it's, like I said, it's evidence-based, and it's been used many, many thousands of times to address every social problem you can imagine all around the world. So it begins with a shared vision. We have shared measurement and learning. We have a container for change, continuous engagement, and mutually reinforcing activities. So that's the way all these different organizations come together to try and figure out how to work forward in a way that makes a difference. And if you can go back one slide. So this is a map that we made in Malawi actually the week before as part of the movement for community-led development in Malawi, and we also did this in Zambia. And this is when about 30 stakeholders came together, including people who represented the voice of the community and a lot of different NGOs and other stakeholders. And they mapped out the system that they believe produces community-led development in their country. This is in Malawi, for example. And one of the most moving parts here is that it's hard to see because this is from above, but the towers of influence are who are the most influential actors in this system. And the most influential actors are the donors, the central government, and the ministries. And very over to the far right, that pink one at the very end, that's the communities. And they don't even have one block on their Post-it notes. So, as part of the group that came together and mapped this out and envisioned the future of community-led development in Malawi, we moved all the blocks over and we stacked them very high on the community note there. And we said, this is the future we're envisioning, and we're going to use all of our collective knowledge and wisdom and our collective impact approach to shift that power to the communities so that they have a say in determining their way forward. And
Awesome, Ian.
Yes.
I said it was an awesome plan, right? That's why we use the hashtag #ShiftThePower. So if you want to know, if you're tweeting, use that hashtag #ShiftThePower. The movement all uses it. So with that, I want to turn to my colleague and office mate, Mary Kate Costellow, because we've talked about community level action, we've talked about the in-program country level action, but there's a lot of action going on at this place. Who knows what this place is? Now, I don't know if you can tell who is standing at the big podium, but in the history of the Hunger Project, only one Hunger Project staff member has ever stood at that big podium where the heads of state stand. And that's Mary Kate Costellow. So, Mary Kate has been providing both a leadership and a transformative leadership role. Joan Holmes once defined that kind of leadership that builds partnership as, if the coffee needs to be made, make the coffee. And so that kind of organizing, mobilizing at the international actors level is something that Mary Kate does on a daily basis, and I wanted to tell you about it. So tell us about it, Kate.
Cool. Hi, everyone.
Hi.
Somehow a room with our investors almost seems more intimidating than being at the General Assembly Hall. So when I came to the Hunger Project 5 years ago, John and I were talking about what the Hunger Project needed as it had just newly come to DC. John was a one-man band in DC, and I was the example of doubling the staff. And he had come down, and he was the co-chair for a group called the Food Security and Agriculture Working Group in DC. And the goal was that we needed to really get our advocacy numbers up. And I think the first 3 words in the job description was just network, network, network. What can we do to take our approaches and bring them into the conversations with the World Visions, with the Save the Children's, with the World Bank, with the UN? It's like, well, what other working groups? Well, all of them. We work in all of the sectors, so we need to join all the working groups in DC. So part of my day-to-day in building our partnerships is to be an active member in a working group with a number of other organizations that most of which are now in the movement, but often do work in very sector-specific ways. So all of our programs have integrated programming. There are plenty of examples of other organizations that work exclusively on just water or have a majority of their programs that are only on food security, etc. So it was our goal to join.
And you'll tell me when to show the next slide, right?
I will.
Okay.
I will. The next one is one of my favorite things that I still get to do with the organization, is to sit and be a part of the Water, Sanitation, and Hygiene Working Group in DC, to continue being a part of Food Security and Ag, the 1,000 Days Partnership Alliance, which is about nutritious interventions for children under the age of 2 from their day of conception, a working group on global health, a G7, G20 working group, the working group on the Alliance to End Hunger for their advocacy. We sat as the co-chair on their one-side working group, the International Food Security Working Group. The Big Ideas Gender Coalition, to look specifically at gender issues in DC and in development and in foreign development assistance. The Maternal Newborn Child Health Working Group, which I sit on the executive committee now. And how could we get into the pockets of all of these working groups and build these relationships with all of these other organizations and bring one thing to each working group that brought all of these topics together. And it was always gender focused, community leadership, and the art of the partnership that these organizations can build beyond these sectors. So we sat in the working groups for a little while, but we had this wonderful advantage that the Hunger Project has been in consultative status with the UN since '85. I don't know, though, that we had ever been able to take it to the level that we ended up going when we saw that the Sustainable Development Goals were being adopted. So leading up to the SDGs, there was a mandated policy that civil society had to be actively consulted in the making of the Sustainable Development Goals. So for years, we then started collaborating with our members in DC to be a part of what's called the intergovernmental negotiations. So we would submit applications to host events and high-level discussions and even make remarks in the rooms, in the chambers that are on the official record for that quick 3-minute slot that you get. And it ended up being a group of 5 of us. It was Save the Children, World Vision, Action Against Hunger, the Hunger Project, and WaterAid. And the 5 of us were this powerhouse of girls that would just storm the halls of the UN for 2 years leading up to the adoption of the SDGs, talking about how all the SDGs had to be connected, taking WaterAid's expertise in WASH, taking Action Against Hunger expertise in food security, taking Save the Children's expertise in minors, taking our expertise in community leadership, and then bringing the members of parliament and the ministers together to talk about it. We can say that we did have a big hand in making sure that 3 very important words got into Sustainable Development Goal number 16, and that was to have peaceful and inclusive institutions at all levels. So not just the central government, but pushing at all levels, where the extra last mile is, where the most destitute people are, etc. And then it came to, okay, so we have all these national working groups, and we still to this day are in all of them. I'm active in, I think, 7 or so working groups, still in the executive committee for MNCH. And then recently, Save the Children, World Vision came back to us again and said, okay, well, we're gonna pull together a new policy for Congress. And just like Ann says, you cannot march up to Congress, you know, policy and say, tell the president to stamp it. It doesn't work that way. So we're now part with World Vision, Save the Children, the Hunger Project, and the International Center for Research on Women, drafting out what's called the Girls Lead Act. And we will hopefully see this put before Congress this coming week, actually, on the 15th. To start to get signatures from congressmen and women for a policy that would mandate that all foreign development assistance that the US government does abroad must have aspects of girls' political rights awareness and political leadership engagements, that we can start to see this moving, this dial moving at the very most local level. But then beyond those working groups, we still had to join working groups that are part of the UN as well. So we made sure that we were sitting at the table of the major group for children and youth, and the major group for indigenous people, and the major group for NGOs, and the major group for women. So we were able to then meet organizations from all over the world, some national organizations, and then realizing that there was an opportunity for us to sometimes step aside and submit opportunities for Daisy Uwamagusho, our country director in Uganda, to come and make sure that the UN paid her to come and talk at the UN about the work that is so important at the community level. That the UN pays Badiol, Dr. Majumdar, to come from Bangladesh to come to the UN and talk about it instead. And making sure that these very important global South voices from our program countries are seated at the table, are rubbing shoulders with ministers and Secretary General employees, etc. And that's how we ended up here at this stage. We were one of the forefront organizations that pulled together the global youth inputs for the annual Commission on the Status of Women. And I was asked with the World Association of Girl Guides and Girl Scouts and a group of Indigenous women to stand up and talk about these very specific inputs that the youth of the world have to the official outcome declaration of that year's Commission on the Status of Women. And I'm proud to say that we were able to get all of the delegates in the room standing and clapping in support of gender equality. You can see them all giving a high five for SDG goal number 5.
So that's the standing ovation that you never see in the UN General Assembly that MK catalyzed.
Yes, it was wonderful. So as not to commandeer the panel, especially since I am between you listening to this wonderful panel and then now getting to interact with us and interacting with each other and going and getting ready for the evening, that I guess when we really created our very strategic advocacy priorities for the Hunger Project and for the movement and tying our own visibility as an organization, our own expertise as an organization into global policies and into programming, into the movement's agenda, that it was never just about water and it was never just about gender. It was always about integrating community leadership and the dignity and the human rights of all the people. But we have a great example to show at the end that I go to no limit. I will wear a poop suit at a gigantic conference just to partner with WaterAid, because open defecation and water sanitation and hygiene is just as relevant to community-led development as we talk about human rights and dignity. So there you have it. I give a crap is written right there on our little with shoes that say the future is female on each foot. So there you have it, the human rights and dignity through the Hunger Project's advocacy strategy.
Okay. So we have a few moments left in this session. Anyone have any questions or comments? And someone will take a mic and scurry it around. Bridge.
Hi, first thanks to all the panelists and John for giving us such a multi-dimensional, multi-level insight into our work. So one of my questions is, when we choose to go into a country and let's say, recently I met someone from Sierra Leone and who is interested in bringing the work there, what is that process? But also, even when we choose an epicenter, or in India, we're in 6 states, how do we choose where to work? And what is that process?
That's a great question. There's 2 parts of it. So there's a whole team of people right now scurrying around about getting the movement going in Sierra Leone. The movement, it doesn't cost a lot to get the movement going if someone else is there to anchor it, to put up the staff in the office, etc. So we're at the stage with Sierra Leone where we have like 9 small grassroots groups eager to start a chapter, and we're looking for the group in the capital that has a meeting room and some clout to anchor it. And I think it shouldn't take much longer to get it. So the Hunger Project itself is not likely to go into more countries or even more states in India as itself, because that's a very long, drawn out, and very expensive process. So we're looking at this movement as the way to spread our methodology and have it taken up. Just as, for instance, we have, for Zambia, I mean, the Hunger Project's logo is up there, but we have, 2 staff members in Zambia? 2 staff members in Zambia. And all the work of mobilizing the community and everything else will be done by those other 2 organizations. They are there just to share the methodology and ensure quality control and financial accountability. So it's that, and that was a unique opportunity that the money came to us. So we're just going to keep poking and enrolling and enlisting. But right now, we've got a group of people seriously looking at getting the movement going in Nigeria, in Sierra Leone, in Chad, in Mali, we're in conversation. Well, and they're wanting to do like a launching event next week in Rwanda. So the answer to that so far has been no. You need a little more groundwork done, but it's spreading, and there's no reason why we can't get this everywhere that it's needed, as the little leveragey thing said.
Thank you.
Other questions?
That's
Yes.
not a question, it's a comment.
That is a comment.
I don't really think I'm going to be able to get through this. I didn't get that education or that opportunity or that voice. But I did get my passion to stand with the people that I was introduced to through the Hunger Project, through Assembly training many years ago in '82. And as an investor in this work, I am so blown away, and I'm so proud. And I feel like I get to do my little part to reorient my molecules to participate as a global citizen with all of you in this extraordinary stuff that you're doing. You know, John, you've been talking about community-led development for a couple of years now, and I come and I sit and I listen, and I haven't quite gotten it. But as you started the meeting today and you said, you know, the Hunger Project has always asked the question, what's missing if provided would make an extraordinary difference? And I can just see that this brilliant idea that you came up with, or somebody came up with, called community-led development, as being the next leverage point. You know, you said the little person there on the globe is just amazing. And I'm just continue to be blown away every year by this. That's number one. And number two, I'm so glad on our website now that we talk about the weekend of events, because this Saturday is amazing. I'm so glad that I'm here to be informed about what my Hunger Project is doing, and I'm so honored to spend my money, my energy. It's my energy. What I get up in the morning to do, to go to work, to make money, to be able to be here with you guys, and to cause something miraculous in this world on behalf of our human family. So just thank you all so much.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. You got through that better than almost any human being ever. So I just have a couple more things to say. One is that this is happening, and when Yasmin says miraculous, it is miraculous at times. This statement is by the Trump-appointed head of USAID. I often tell people the existence of this man, Mark Green, is evidence that there is a God. He is so on board, and he controls a $50 billion a year budget. And he's all about the journey to self-reliance, which is a title of brochures we've been publishing for 20 years. And they literally used working papers and white papers that we had generated in the transformation of USAID over the last 2 years. This is exciting stuff.
We spent a lot of time with USAID staff.
Yes. So, if you still have your phone out, enter one word about the Hunger Project now.
And transformation.
So, as you can tell, and as Yasmin pointed out, this is a big lift. You know, this is one of my favorite illustrations, because I read once read the life story of Susan B. Anthony, who campaigned her whole life and died before women had the vote in the United States. So this is that arc of history is indeed long, and it is really up to each of us. You'll notice we were very intentional about not allowing the hotel to put out any plastic bottles or plastic cups today. That can seem like a gesture, or it could be a symbolic step to mobilize people to transform our consumption, which is one of the SDGs. We must transform our consumption if there's going to be a sustainable future for our planet. There are so many things every one of us can do, and not only do it, but do it not only for the act itself, but as an invitation to everybody in our world to join with us in that action. And those, as Leo Tolstoy said, those actions every day are what bends the arc of the moral universe. So, you and everybody you know to live in that question of what is being presented to me today that will advance the Sustainable Development Goals, that will advance the work of the Hunger Project, that will advance the work of many other organizations that we work with that are aligned with these goals, that will bring that collective voice that never, ever, ever gives up until the job is done. So thank you all for being here today. And we recorded this. Amy recorded it. Wave, Amy. And we're going to edit in all the slides into it and put it up on the website so you can share it with more people. So thank you all, and thank you all. That was wonderful, wonderful.